Xeno scum. Forcadia! Die! Oh no.
Unit orders, one of the most important functions in Kill Team. They change how you are able to operate. They dictate the very flow of the game, and for many, they are simply a way to hide your units for turn 1 and then start attacking in turn 2 and beyond. This isn't completely wrong necessarily, but there is a little more depth here than some perceive. Ways of manipulating your opponent's actions, methods of choosing the better outcome for your team despite your bloodthirst. I wish to impart some examples on you to think about in your struggles for victory. Maybe this will give you a little dash of strategic creativity when Hail Mary plays are needed, or maybe it will just help reinforce some basic decision-making skills. Real quick though, if you're new to the channel and are interested in tabletop games like Kill Team, don't forget to hit that subscribe button, maybe the like as well. And if you're interested in continuing these rules and tactics discussions, or maybe just show us your latest paint project, our community Discord is linked below. We'd love to have you. With that said, let's take a look at the deceptively intricate world of unit orders. Conceal or engage? That is always the question for each and every model placed, for every turn of activation. For the uninitiated, simply put in its most basic form, conceal provides the unit with some benefits to its defensive properties. Engage gives the unit access to a few actions that are needed to attack enemies. Normally, these orders are chosen when placing units in the setup phase, and for turn 1, most units are stuck with these orders. There are methods to go against this rule, but that tends to get specific. From turn 2 onwards, however, as a unit activates, it can change the order it is under and do what is needed. For many, this simply means that all units should be in conceal for turn 1, and turn 2 and beyond is for engage, as you should be within range to go loud. Simple, brutal, and at times effective, but it isn't everything. I find that I even have to remind myself at times that a unit can change from engage to conceal if needed, and that there is value there. It might be best to provide examples. The way I compartmentalize Kill Team in my mind when it comes to orders is to consider the early game and beyond turn 1 as two distinct modes. My rationale as to orders provided tend to change based on which part of the game I'm in. So let's take a look at what each of these two modes of thought entail. To be clear, we'll be coming at this from the angle of the Critical Ops 2022 setup rules. 3 groups of relatively evenly distributed units placed in an alternating fashion between yourself and your opponent. Some of this still applies to the original deployment rules for the current Kill Team system, but it is a little harder to utilize these functions. Let me set up a little mission for us. Open board, couple heavy pieces, and a spread of light. Already some barricades around, some vantage just outside of deployment. This is a long edge setup, which means turn 2 could easily see some close range fire or even melee. We'll keep that in mind for this. The matchup, Corsairs versus Phobos. We'll take this from the Corsairs' perspective. In the initial roll-off of the game, they get stuck with Defender, so the first batch of 3 Eldar must be placed. But how? Most people's base instinct is to place units in cover in conceal, but let me put out a different idea. Using the fact that the Phobos won't be able to see past this building, the Corsairs could place a unit on the other side and engage, with no downside. Can't shoot what you can't see. We could even use this as a way to control where the Phobos players sets up. Placing a gunner with a blaster safely out of line of sight in engage is a massive threat to any team, elite or otherwise. And since a lot of the sparse terrain on the field is light, the Phobos will have a hard time placing units that aren't under immediate threat. Could be useful. But let's hold this in our back pocket for a second. Instead, the Corsairs placed their first 2 waves in KG positions, concealed, placed to get to their objectives. The Phobos have done the same from their end. Eventually, in the last group, the Corsairs play this engaged gunner card. Now there is a bit of pressure for the Phobos here. Their last group may need an active threat that could counter a sudden gunner activation, All their units currently in will have an order of importance placed on their heads for who 100% will need to move early to avoid being vaporized. This could even force the Phobos to utilize recon in their scouting step to try and move a critical operative out before the game begins, allowing the Corsairs to trap them with the infiltrate option to guarantee first activation. If we want to get even more advanced, the Corsairs could have set up the gunner early and conceal in a spot that seemed limited in options. When all units are set up, a ploy the Corsairs have can be used to redeploy the gunner and potentially a different unit. This includes orders, and it occurs after scouting phase dashes and repositioning. Against a mobile team like the Phobos, the false sense of early game security could put them in a very bad position, making turn 1 a desperate scramble with this one action. This can even be applied in some close quarters maps, although not as often as the more open boards. In a similar concept, units with grenades and engage for turn 1 can have a good effect on long edge setups. In open terrain, this Intercessor Grenadier in engage for turn 1 can easily remain tucked out of line of sight. The value it brings is in shutting down an area of the field for any oncoming enemies. Most of the time, this is regardless of the enemy's orders. Consider that this unit has 3 APL. A charge and a dash could easily bring it to this area of this kill zone. Then consider that its grenade ignores cover when checking line of sight. The 6-inch range adds this much to the overall threat range of this unit. During turn 1, as long as this Grenadier has not activated yet, it could be very unwise for any opponent to wander too close. This can provide a lot of territory control to help protect allies depending on the difference in total activations both sides have. Especially useful when used against elite teams. I don't care how good the armor is or how many wounds they have. No elite team would be okay taking an anti-elite crack grenade to the face in turn 1. Early game engage orders can also be used to bait enemies. The Hearthkin are a good example of this. Gunners and many of the specialists are key to the victory, but there is value in using units as bait. Placing several warriors in engage early in deployment could serve to have your opponent respond in kind, looking to snag early game kills. Tie in an infiltration scouting option or a well-placed rotary cannon looking to abuse the obscuring rules, and an enemy defeating a warrior will not just give it a grudge token, but in many cases leave it susceptible to return fire that comes with a guaranteed crit or two. Useful, although experience will teach you when it is best used. Against elite teams like the Legionary, a plasma gun can dash around a corner, fire on the Hearthkin, and then move back into safety. Be wary of bait tactics against 3 APL teams, sometimes they can come back to bite you. Another thing to consider is your opponent. There are now more than a few teams whose range options are very limited. The Chaos Cult's threat range is mostly down to 6 inches. Gellerpox are much the same, with their leader's flamer or their mutant's grenades, and teams like these need to be called early on in order to make later turns easier. In these matchups, it's almost a guarantee that you should have as many, if not all of your units that could put damage downfield, in engage. Conceal doesn't help much when a full health Lumberghast finally gets to you. Now, what a lot of these early game uses of engage or conceal boil down to is what the overall goal is, and even if that goal is achievable. For instance, what if the Corsair gunner earlier was contending with heavy terrain all over the board? That vantage point would only kind of help. Most likely it wouldn't have led to any early game action and could have only served to set that gunner up to be in danger for turn 2. Not ideal. When in doubt, early game can easily consist of a full list of conceal. It might not seem fun, but safe tends not to be fun. In those situations, the fun tends to happen after this initial push. I imagine for most players that the basic approach to the game is pretty set for the Beyond Turn 1 segment. Able to do something damage related? Engage order. The hard part is knowing when. An enemy went engage and shot at one of your units. What is your first instinct? Immediately go to engage on one of yours and return fire. Why? Is it going to Overwatch next? Maybe do other things first. But there are other plays that can be made here. Let's run down some ideas. A few thought experiments. A Wormblade just captured this point here, and this nearby legionary feels like it could do some things. Option 1, go engage, move up or charge and kill that little guy, then capture the point with the last AP. Sounds good, right? But then what? That mining laser unleashes hell on you. Maybe that sniper as well. Option 2, wait until later, then proceed with option 1. Maybe. But even if it waits, the Wormblade tend to have more activations than the legionary, so they could just wait to kill it until later. Option 3, if you really want that point, which you should, stay in conceal. Get in there, use the cover at hand. If no enemy Wormblade can get within 2 inches of it or circumvent the cover it's behind, it might waste an action point, but nothing can hurt it that turn. Plus, more victory points, and everyone needs those. Also, did you know? Shh, come here. Not many know this. You can go from engage to conceal. Mind blown. Again, I know the bloodthirst is strong, and maybe your squad is in full dominance mode and the score won't even be close, but if the points are a bit closer than you're comfortable with, maybe that 2 wounds remaining Kasserkin demo trooper needs to rotate away from the firefight, in conceal, having served its purpose. You keep a 2 APL unit alive to work the backline. Your more capable units can take its place at the front. Not a bad option. Pop quiz. It's turn 3. At the end of the prior turn, this Kernathi charged and fought this Reaver. A clash of blades left the Reaver at 4 health, the Kernathi at 3. The Corsairs have the initiative, and you as the leader have chosen to try and keep the close-range fighter alive. What do you do? Maybe fight to finish off the Reaver and charge the veteran 7 inches away for safety? Then the vet would just kill the Space Elf in its activation. No. How about this? The Kernathi returns to conceal. But wait! Then it can't fight, right? Well, the only universal actions affected by the unit order are shoot and charge. Fight is a completely valid option for conceal, and changing orders normally isn't restricted by engagement range. So while it is concealed, the Kernathi would finish off its opponent without issue, barring the gods of RNG deeming the fate of this Corsair as never rolling above a 2 anymore. It would then be able to move and dash after the fight, outrunning most would-be assailants and safely tucking away in cover. Even in the injured state, this unit can serve other uses, ensuring the backline remains strong, and it could potentially find 1 more life to claim before the mission's end. Don't be afraid to recover and hide units that have served their purpose. Victory points in Kill Team are of paramount importance. In my opinion, this is only followed up by action point economy. The more potential action points you lose, the less you'll be able to achieve as turns progress. Now, these concepts are a little advanced. Not exactly super complex, and they certainly don't involve teams with ways of changing their orders at will, but something I see from new players is a sort of forgetfulness over what can be done. I still fall into that trap sometimes myself, and if you tell anyone that, I'll hunt you down. Anyway, did you find any of this helpful? Maybe I helped crack some strategic code you weren't quite aware of in Kill Team. Or maybe you have some fun little interactions you like to use against your opponents. Let the people know in the comments below, and if you'd like to converse further on the topic of strategy in Kill Team as well as beyond, don't forget there is a Discord linked in the description. All that being said, likes for the like god and subscribes for the subscribe throne. I am Kimmerix, and I'll see you in the next one.